What if I told you that this compact, TnT efficient blast chamber has its own diagnostics to predict when it will break before shutting down automatically? G'day ladies and gents, Cubic Media here. It's been exactly a year since I published the first video I would consider to be of good quality. The video was about a massive design I made with Smoky Dog. It obtained the maximum efficiency possible of TnT, blowing up 600 blocks with every explosion. So check out that video if you want to know more. The only problem with this design is that A, it's very big and very complicated, and B, it cannot run slower than 7,800 blocks per hour without losing items. But apart from these 2 points, it's a very good design and perfect if you want a 100% reliable blast chamber with maximum TnT efficiency. However, if you want a much smaller design that is still quite TnT efficient, the remaining options have some issues. We begin with Elmango's blast chamber. It's actually a really solid design. In fact, my first video ever was me trying to improve on this design, and then failing miserably. In theory, this blast chamber is extremely reliable. However, as people try to use it, they experience problems. Many of these were simply user error. However, even if the problem was the player's fault, the blast chamber would punish them pretty harshly. Its mode of failure is that it destroys itself. I tried to fix this issue with a much simpler and more compact design. Because the TnT is now launched from the bottom, it is incapable of blowing itself up. However, instead it would just jam all of the block conveyors and completely stop. And this could happen randomly at any time. However, Elmango's blast chamber would not have this issue. Pay close attention here to the way in which Elmango's block shaper works. Notice how the TnT is only ignited when the blast chamber has received all the blocks needed to fill a layer. This ensures that the layer is full for when the TnT detonates, meaning the entire column is moved at once, allowing the TnT to destroy more blocks. This is because blocks have no blast resistance when being pushed by a piston. Now look at my design. The TnT is ignited for the next layer, for blocks which have not arrived yet. This works fine if you can time the TnT with the rate at which blocks enter the system. However, if you change the input speed of blocks, there will not be enough blocks by time the TnT has to detonate. The result is that the layer is incomplete, and some blocks do not get moved as the TnT explodes. So given that our only two options for a TnT efficient and simple blast chamber both have issues, let's go ahead and design a brand new blast chamber combining both the geometric simplicity of my blast chamber with the robust block shaper of Elmango's. To begin with, we want to find the optimal block shaper layout. Currently the blast chambers are using this layout, which involves a 7x7 square with these 3 additional blocks on all 4 sides, minus a single hole in the middle for the TnT. With this layout, we obtain 60 blocks per layer, multiplied by 4 layers per TnT detonation, so in total we're getting 240 blocks per TnT. In order to simulate a blast chamber running, in order to test whether our block shapers are reliable, I set up this simple circuit involving a clock, as well as command blocks, which perform all the functions. If we tick warp the system, we can very quickly verify whether a block shaper is actually reliable. For example, watch what happens when I increase the amount of layers per blast from 4 to 5. As you can see, some blocks actually get left behind now. If I increase it further to 6, we start getting columns bottoming out. So if this block shaper works fine, then why do we want to change it? Well, this particular shape is very awkward and difficult to get the blocks into. Also, if we apply our knowledge that we learned from Little Mouse's research, we know that if we remove these blocks, we can potentially add more blocks on the exterior. Running this new layout, we can see it still works fairly reliably. We can also see that some blocks get left behind, and this is an issue because items can get stuck in these blocks and then destroyed by the next explosion. And not only is this layout less efficient, only getting 204 blocks per TnT, it it is just as hard to get blocks into. But watch what happens if I remove these blocks on the outside and then increase the number of layers per blast to 6. Tick warping this layout, we can clearly see that it's extremely reliable and leaving behind no excess blocks. And even though we have less blocks per layer at about 40, at 6 layers, we're getting 240 blocks per TnT again, which is exactly the same as the previous layout. But look at this shape. It's literally just a square. This would be so easy to get blocks into. And it's a geometrical simplicity which makes for an elegantly beautiful solution, such as this. So what we're able to do here is store up a little buffer of blocks before we put them into the blast chamber, then give it enough time to both ignite and detonate the TnT before pushing the entire layer down. This means that we can always ensure that the layer is full when the TnT has to detonate. All we need to do is simply copy the block shaper for all 4 sides, then bring over the block distribution system from my blast chamber. We also have these additional blocks here to ensure that all 4 sides are perfectly in sync. So when we start the blast chamber, as the blocks get split 4 ways, the differences in the heights for these 4 block conveyors get evened out by those extra blocks. It helps if you actually don't forget components for the block conveyors. There we go, a working blast chamber. If we watch the middle, we can see the block shaper in action. It's actually very satisfying to watch. And there's our TnT. Perfect. But then we still have an issue. If for any reason one of these conveyors gets out of sync with the rest, okay, a single block out of sync and it seems to run fine. But what happens if we put it more out of sync? Okay, I was honestly expecting to jam by now. Come on, this has to break somehow. What? Come on. Break, damn you! There we go. As you can see, it takes a lot of effort to break this blast chamber. However, it's always a possibility that block conveyors could get out of sync. The 2 major culprits for things going wrong will be player error, which can be mitigated, but also unloading the machine while it's running. So let's give the blast chamber the good old unloading test to see what happens. Alright, just finished tick warping. Let's see what's become of our blast chamber. Ah, okay. It seems that all that happened is one of the block conveyors stopped and our smart piston jammed. Unjamming it, it seems to be working fine again. Oh, no, it's stuffed. As you can see, unloading a machine while it's running causes some serious issues. Alright, we've fixed up the farm. Now what I want to do is test what happens when we give it an erratic feed rate. What I'm going to do is put down an observer with a redstone ore in front and place an armor stand on top of it. Now if I crank the random tick speed, we should start feeding the blast chamber with an erratic feed rate. In order to prevent our input from seizing during this test, I'm just going to put this comparator here to constantly give it updates. And as you can tell, with the random tick speed cranked so high, the copper blocks are actually oxidizing. So I was just running this wondering why it kept failing, even though in principle it shouldn't be able to fail even with a randomized input. And then I realized the copper blocks changing states are actually activating these observers, causing the block conveyors to jam. That's an interesting note. Don't put observers pointing into your copper blocks if you want to use them in your blast chamber. Alright, now that I've fixed up that absolute cluster rut, and substituted our block for one that does not change states in the middle of the block stream, we can now go back to testing a completely erratic feed rate. That's more like it, 100 hours of tick warping and no issues whatsoever, even with the most apocalyptic feed rate possible. And this makes perfect sense given that no matter how random the input from here is, it doesn't matter what speed the blocks come in, they always get separated 4 ways. And this means that all 4 sides always receive exactly the same amount of blocks, and so, even with the most apocalyptic conditions, they should never go out of sync. However, as I just demonstrated with the unloading test and using copper which could oxidize inside the block streams, there are still unforeseen issues which can cause the block streams to go out of sync. And the consequences could be potentially damaging to the blast chamber, requiring a lot of work for the player to fix it. So what if we could detect when the block streams are out of sync and then shut down the blast chamber preemptively? And this is exactly what we do using these very clever NIMPLY gates invented by Binary. The circuit is extremely simple. All you need is a buddable component such as this dropper. It gets bud powered by this comparator. Meanwhile, this rail gets powered by a repeater. And the way the bud power works is that while this block is powered, this dropper has to receive an update before it gets activated. This rail can provide that block update. However, if this comparator and this repeater get powered at exactly the same time, the rail will be powered by the repeater first, sending the update before the block is even powered. Then the block will be powered, and our dropper will not be powered because it has not received the update at the same time as the comparator powering the block. The result is that this circuit only sends an output if both inputs aren't activated at exactly the same time. Therefore, we can use this circuit to compare the block conveyors for 2 sides and whether they're in sync. The very instant they go out of sync, we can detect that almost immediately, sound an alarm, then automatically shut down the blast chamber. So all we need to do now is make sure that we turn off whatever's running. Go down to the bottom here, and we can see these 2 indicator lights. The blast chamber will also detect when it's low on TNT and shut down automatically. However, in this case, the blast chamber is telling us that the conveyors are out of sync. We can just reset this, and now we need to diagnose the problem. If we look at all the block conveyors, we can see that there are 8 blocks in this particular buffer, 8 blocks in this particular one, and once again 8 blocks in this buffer. If we look at this buffer over here, we can only count 7 blocks. This means in order to fix the blast chamber, we need to make sure that all 4 of these buffers have exactly the same amount of blocks. So if I add 1 more block to make this 8, we should now be able to turn the blast chamber back on without running into any issues. So not only is this blast chamber extremely hard to break, but if it feels like it's going to break, it will shut down automatically and notify the player that there's a problem. This should hopefully reinforce the idea that this design should be truly unbreakable. No matter what happens, the blast chamber has you covered. So here are my 2 fully integrated concepts for this blast chamber. This one has a TnT duper, and I'll get back to that later. We'll start by looking at the non-duping version. These designs feature all of the features that you need for a basic blast chamber. We have the item collection down the bottom, a water elevator tucked away to the side, as well as a hybridized mixed and full box loader. So what this will do, this will take any blocks put into the blast chamber that come out as items and pack them all neatly into shulker boxes. Because the items that can come out of the blast chamber vary a lot, I've also got a manual force eject right here, which will force the shulker currently in the system to be ejected, meaning that if any items get left behind in a partially full box at the end of using your blast chamber, you can in fact obtain that shulker box automatically. In this interface, we have an on switch for a cobblestone and basalt generator mounted at the back. We also have a simple toggle for which type of stone you want to harvest. Powering this lever will force blue ice down to replace the water, generating basalt. However, leaving this off will reveal the water and generate cobblestone. And finally, we have this little booth here that the player can stand in and place down any block they want to convert to an item. For example, concrete powder. All you need to do is go up to the top, chuck in a box of concrete powder, and in survival mode, you can pull out some powder and start placing it down. The dropper will only dispense items to you if you successfully place a block as well, meaning if the farm has to shut down for any reason, you will not lose any items. And of course, for the non-TNT duping variant, we have a simple TNT input that you can fill up. The TNT duping variant is exactly the same, except obviously it doesn't need to consume TNT. It uses a special anti-loss duper that does not need a minecart or a detector rail or any complicated slimestone structures. This TNT duper is very simple to set up. Once you've built the blast chamber, all you need to do is flick this lever, activating the safety for the TNT. Now you can safely place the TNT down without it being ignited, before retracting the lever again. Now the duper is armed, and any additional updates to the TNT will cause it to detonate. For example, if I place the TNT down without activating the safety switch, this will happen. However, due to the waterlogged trapdoor, the blast won't do any damage. So make sure you have this lever activated before doing anything around the TNT duper. Here we have both designs running side by side, working perfectly straight out of the schematic. Of course, you can obtain said schematics down in the description. Additionally, we also have standalone versions of the blast chamber, which can be connected to any kind of block farm like a tree farm for example. Just make sure that you have some sort of override on the farm, which can take an input from the blast chamber's fault detection, allowing it to stop the farm automatically. So there we have it. A new and improved blast chamber intelligent enough to feel pain. That's definitely something we need in the technical community. Thank you very much for watching, and if you're one of those mad lads from a year ago when the channel started, good on ya. Otherwise, if you're new to the channel and want to see more technical contraptions like this, consider subscribing and join the squad. Anyway, hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time.